Knoxville short-term rental rules. Do they exist? And if they do, what are they? Who do they apply to? Should you be worried about them? Is this something that should be on your radar? Well, if you're considering getting into the short-term rental market, or maybe you're already in there and you're like, maybe there are rules that I need to know about. Let's dive in and check them out. Okay, first things first. Currently, at the making of this video, it is October 2nd, 2023. Knox County does not have short-term rental regulations. However, as of August 23rd, the county commission was talking about them, and that's kind of in the works. So I just want to say that on the front end. This video is specifically about Knox City. So the city of Knoxville has short-term rental regulations in place, and that is what we're going to talk about today. So again, it's October 2nd, 2023 at the time of this video. So if you're in the county right now, you're good. But just look alive. All right. So number one thing to know is, yes, as of January 1st, 2018, the city of Knoxville started regulating or having rules in place for short-term rental units. So when I say short-term rental, I'm just going to read this definition exactly from the City of Knoxville Ordinance. It says short-term rental unit, a dwelling unit, a portion of a dwelling unit, or any other structure or space that is occupied or intended or designed for occupancy by transients for dwelling, lodging, or sleeping, and which is offered to transients for consideration for a period of up to 30 consecutive calendar days. Short-term rental units shall not include dwelling units owned by the federal government, the state, or any of their agencies or political subdivisions. Facilities licensed by the state as healthcare facilities, including temporary family healthcare structures, hotels, inns, motels, bed and breakfast properly approved by the city or campgrounds, or dwelling units rented according to a written month-to-month lease. Okay, so that is what we're talking about when we say short-term rental unit. Now, the general gist of this is you have to have a permit. There are two types of permits you can have. The permits last for a year. You have to renew them every year. That's the general gist. That's the Cliff Notes version of this entire thing. So, that being said, what is involved with an application? So, with the application process, you're going to there are pieces of the application. So it's the actual application itself that includes the acknowledgement of the rules, and then you have an affidavit of safety compliance, which is basically you saying that you have the proper amount of smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and fire extinguishers. So here is the direct quote. Every smoke and carbon monoxide alarm must function properly with the alarm sounding after pushing the test button, and the fire extinguisher must be operational. It shall be unlawful to operate a short-term rental unit without a smoke alarm, carbon monoxide detector, or fire extinguisher as required by this section. An application for an operating permit must be accompanied by an affidavit verifying the number, locations, and operations of the acquired life safety equipment for the short-term rental unit, and the equipment will be subject to verification or inspection. Now, if you go look at the FAQs about short-term rental units, they're saying that you're not going to be inspected. Like, there is no inspection that happens when you apply. Now, you could be subject to that, but it's not that they're doing an inspection of that across the board in order for you to be rewarded a permit. And then they've got specific rules about where the smoke alarms need to be and the carbon monoxide detectors. Also on the application, you put lessee information. So if it's like someone owns it and then is leasing it, you put that information. And then you put the information of the contact person, the person that's going to be in charge of the unit. You put who owns the unit. You put an actual site plan. So this to me is like the layout of like where the bedrooms are, where the kitchen is, etc. There is an indemnification clause, which is basically like you can't sue the city of Knoxville just because something goes wrong with a short-term rental and they gave you a permit. Because something goes wrong with it, you can't just sue them. So that's that clause. And then also if you have a type 1 permit, which we'll talk about, you have to notify your neighbors, basically. And when I say your neighbors, it's very specific. I'll get there in a second. So that's the actual application process itself. Now, once your application is deemed full and complete, there will be a decision made by the Business License and Tax Office. And they make that within 14 days. Within 14 days, they say, yes, you can have a permit, or no, you may not have a permit. And once you have a permit, this is good for 1 year, 1 calendar year. All right, so here's the 2 types of permits. Now, if you go look at the Ordinance website, it's going to talk about a type 3 permit, which no longer exists because these were people that had things in operation prior to the effective date of current ordinances. So you could no longer renew if you had a type 3. So that's a side note. So there are 2 types, type 1 and type 2. So type 1 is an owner-occupied unit in a residential district. So basically what this is saying is, in residentially zoned districts, an owner who resides on site where the short-term rental is located is eligible to obtain a type 1 operating permit. The owner seeking the type 1 permit must be a natural person, no corporations or LLCs. The owner must also establish that they reside on site where the short-term rental unit is located by providing at least 2 documents as identified in the ordinance. So there are specific forms of identification that you're saying that I live at this property and I also have a short-term rental unit. So type 1 is no LLCs, no corporations. It is an owner-occupied situation. The other type is a type 2. This is a non-owner occupied and non-residential districts. So the explanation for that, in non-residential districts, the zoning must still allow for residential use. So whatever the zoning is, it must still allow that you could have someone living there. An owner or a tenant may obtain a Type 2 operating permit for a short-term rental unit. A tenant is eligible for a Type 2 permit if the tenant has received permission from the owner of the unit, as indicated by the owner's signature on the permit application. If the tenant obtains a Type 2 permit, the owner is still liable for activity of the short-term rental unit. So if I am leasing a place from the owner directly, and then I decide I want to short-term rent that, then the owner is still liable for what happens in that short-term rental unit. Additionally, in non-residential districts, the owner is not required to be a natural person, aka it could be a corporation or LLC. So in this type 2 non-residential situation, you could have an LLC or corporation running it. Please note here, it says, however, a person or entity, corporation or LLC, can only hold 2 Type 2 permits at once, citywide. Let me read that again. However, a person or entity, corporation, LLC, etc., can only hold 2 Type 2 permits at once, citywide. So keep that in mind. Take with that what you will. Okay, I'm just gonna leave that right there for you. Leaving it right there for you. Okay, so now that we know that there's an application, we know there's 2 types of application. One is cheaper. Type 1 is a $70 fee at application, and Type 2 is $120. Both of them are $50 to renew. So once you have this, you need to renew within 14 days of that year being expired. It says on the FAQ sheet, basically, what is the process for renewing the permit? Notification of the need to renew will be sent by the city to each operator. The operator will need to pay the $50 renewal fee by the appropriate date on the notification to remain compliant. Otherwise, you got to start the process over. No one wants to do that. Now, let's talk about consequences. Say you're operating without a permit. So first of all, this is what the ordinance says. It is unlawful to operate or advertise any short-term rental unit within the city without a short-term rental operating permit issued under this article. And here is why. The city has determined that the regulation of short-term rental units is necessary in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, as well as to promote the public interest by regulating the areas and methods of operation. To meet these ends, the city has determined that all persons or entities that desire to operate short-term rental units within the city must be issued a permit pursuant of the requirements of this article. So that's directly from the ordinance language for the city. Now, what are consequences? Operation without permit. Any short-term rental operating or advertising for operation without a valid permit shall be deemed a public safety hazard. The city may issue... There's a typo in here. The city may issue the operator, the owner, or local contact person may receive a civil citation for operating or advertising for the operation without a permit, and the penalty for such is $50 per day, which could add up. So essentially, you get a citation and get a daily fee. Then there's some notes about if it's a public nuisance, that's obviously in violation. If you get complaints, that's in violation. And then how do you get your permit revoked? So there's 3 things that are listed about how you get your permit revoked. The city may revoke an operating permit if the city discovers that, number 1, an applicant obtained the permit by knowingly providing false information on the application. Number 2, the continuation of a short-term rental unit presents a threat to the public health or safety. And number 4, the operator or short-term rental unit violates regulations of this article or any other city ordinance. So essentially, any of those 3 reasons, you could have your permit revoked. Now, this is something interesting to think about, or some other notes. Taxes. Do you have to pay taxes, and what is involved with filing and remitting taxes on rentals? Yes, you must pay taxes. The city of Knoxville, Knox County, and the state of Tennessee all have a role in the collection of taxes. So there's the occupancy tax, and then there's also the sales tax. So according to the FAQs provided by the city of Knoxville, FAQs, frequently asked questions, according to that, essentially, excuse my sniffle. Also, did you notice this background behind me is actually Vegas? I'm recording this while I'm at a conference. Because you know, YouTube doesn't sleep, okay? YouTube does not sleep. Okay, occupancy tax. According to this FAQ, it says the platforms that typically promote short-term rentals, i.e. Airbnb, HomeAway, VRBO, etc., are collecting occupancy privilege tax at the time the purchase is made. This tax is then automatically paid to the appropriate respective government entity from the platform. However, if you rent a short-term rental outside these type of platforms, you are responsible for remitting the occupancy tax yourself. So just keep that in mind. Sales tax as well. If you're using a platform, double check this, fact check this. But if you're using a platform like Airbnb, VRBO, etc., they also are taking out that sales tax. If you are not, you are responsible to do so. So please keep that in mind regarding the taxes. We don't need anyone in tax problems, okay? Also, additionally, something that I found was interesting, the maximum occupancy, essentially 2 people per bedroom plus 2 extra. And exactly the language that they use, it says the number of transients in a short-term rental shall not exceed the sum of 2 transients per bedroom plus 2 additional transients, provided, however, that the maximum occupancy of the short-term rental unit shall not exceed 12 persons, including transients and any other individuals residing in or otherwise using the short-term rental unit. So that's just a little interesting fact. I do want to loop back around to something that I mentioned on type 1, where in that application, you basically have to provide notification to neighbors. And I want to read this to you exactly because I thought it was kind of interesting. Okay, how does the notification of neighbors and neighborhood groups work? For type 1 permits, so that's the one where you're living at this unit, you are the owner of this unit and you're living at this unit. For type 1 permits, so for type 2, you do not have to notify. For type 1, you do have to notify. You must notify property owners that own property abutting or across the street from the short-term rental unit. You can see an illustration of these properties in the neighborhood notice form included in the application packet. So AKA, what they're saying is, if you're getting a type 1 permit, you have to notify your neighbors, and on the application it tells you explicitly who would that be, like how it applies. So keep that in mind. The other thing that I wanted to point out, one last little thing, and then we'll be on to the next. Okay, so this is kind of the final note from the city. The question is, what happens if I don't get a permit for my short-term rental unit? And they very clearly just say you are breaking the law. If you operate a short-term rental unit without the required permit, you will be found in violation of the City of Knoxville's Code of Ordinances and subject to enforcement action. Citations with civil penalties may be issued for violations, and further legal action may be pursued. The City of Knoxville is employing enforcement software to aid in monitoring permitted and unpermitted operations of short-term rental units. So essentially they're just saying like, hey, if you do not have a permit, you are breaking the law. So anyways, that being said, those are the things to know. This FAQ document is dated October of 2022. So that was the latest update that is available at the time of making this video, which is now October 2023. So if you have questions, you want to contact the business tax office, and they can help you. So those are the rules and regulations when it comes to short-term rental units in the City of Knoxville. Again, at the time of this video, Knox County is not regulated. They do not have regulations. Knoxville City does, City of Knoxville. So, I mean, the easiest way to know the difference is if you go look on Google and you say City of Knoxville map, or if you just put Knoxville, and it's going to become obvious on that Google map. There's going to be a different, you're going to see, it's going to be denoted. Or just Google City of Knoxville map, and then you're going to like look, if you're thinking, oh, I should get this property, or is this, you know, whatever zoning, blah, blah, blah. You can Google all of that information. The other thing I want to mention is that these rules are not in conflict with an HOA. AKA, if there's an HOA that says you cannot short-term rent, you can't do it. So even if you get a permit, that does not mean you can if the HOA says you can't. So if there are specific rules to the property, deed restrictions or HOAs or whatever that are restricting you from doing it outside of these City of Knoxville ordinances, then the City of Knoxville does not preside over that. And in a way, the HOA kind of supersedes whatever the city would say. So the city does not dabble in what the HOA is doing, because let's be honest, there's 50,011,000 HOAs. So if the homeowners association or the POA, property owners association, you know, says you cannot short-term rent, then then you're essentially dead in the water. Like, you're not going to go trying to get a permit because your neighborhood does not even allow it, regardless of what the city would say about a permit. So that being said, please also keep that in mind. I hope this has been helpful. I hope you're like having some better ideas about what the rules are. There are two links I will include here. One is the actual ordinance page, and the other one is the FAQs PDF, which kind of simplifies what you're reading in the actual ordinance. So if you want the Cliff Notes version, go look at the FAQ. If you want the overview, if you want the link to the application and all of that, go check out the ordinance website. Although I think that there is a link to the application on the FAQ. I could be wrong. No, there's not. I'm wrong. So anyways, I hope this has been helpful. If you want more content about what's going on in real estate in the Knoxville area, as always, please subscribe, because I have so much more information to share with you. I'm Haley Jones, and I will see you on the next video.